I know that good PBS is happening when I go into my service because I see really good quality data. And I think at the heart of PBS is the science of applied behaviour analysis. Any good science requires really good quality data. So as I go into my services, I want to see really good data that informs the functional assessments. We have a really good understanding of why people behave the way that they do. As we begin to put interventions into place with our PBS plans, I want to see really good data graphed up, if possible, so it looks good for staff teams, but we're actually making progress. Because if we're not making progress, we need to do something differently. And I think sometimes when we're talking about behaviours of concern, it can be a really emotive topic, and it can be really difficult to detach from and gain a little bit of perspective. So I think we need to have really good data to help with that, to really give us a sense that we're doing something right. Also, when I go into my service, what I want to see is really good documentation as well. I want to see functional assessment reports that are really thorough and clear. I want to see PBS plans that have really good sets of interventions that are really robust, that are multi-element. I want to see them designed for the people that they're for. So for team leaders, I might want to see a really detailed PBS plan. For direct care staff, I might want to see a simple contingency diagram. I'd like to see a really good, robust PBS policy that everybody understands. I'd like to see organisations have documentation on restrictive practices as well, because at the heart of PBS is the endeavour to try to reduce levels of restrictive practice. So I want to know which individuals have a restrictive practice within their PBS plan. I want to know which individuals are prescribed psychotropic medication. I want to see what dates those individuals are having medication reviews. I want to see restrictive practice reduction documents. And above all else, I want to see the individuals involved in their plans as well, and the individuals and their advocates. So we're being collaborative and inclusive in what we do. I guess what I also want to see as well is this multidisciplinary element. I don't think PBS is about PBS teams or behaviour analysts. I think it involves numerous different people. And certainly some of the research that we've been doing in Jersey, particularly into the correlates of challenging behaviour, and we know that there's certain biological and psychosocial vulnerabilities that lead some people to be slightly more predisposed to challenging behaviour. We know from the research in Jersey, communication impairments are one, lack of engagement is another. So I want to see other professionals involved. I want to see speech and language therapists involved, working on people's communication packages. I want to see occupational therapists working on daily living tasks, getting people involved, supporting staff to be enablers, to be working on people's skills development. So I want to see as well within our plans, task analysis, things like chaining. I want to see people being taught new skills to move them forward. I want to see a real focus on quality of life, not as just an outcome, but as an intervention, because if we're working on quality of life as an intervention, what we're also seeing is a natural reduction in behaviours of concern anyway, and we know that happens. And I think sometimes for staff, it can be really difficult. It's a tough gig working with some of the people that we work with, and sometimes behaviours of concern can be enduring and they can be difficult to change. So I think sometimes we need to give staff something else to be working on as well, to be making progress with. And I had a really good example just this last week in Jersey that I went into a setting where an individual staffed on a 2-to-1 basis, and the staff from the residential team had been working with the staff from the day service to teach him how to walk the short distance between the two settings on his own. And I think that's when I know that PBS is working in our service, because we have staff teams trying to remove what Brodie Patterson describes as a scaffolding around us, trying almost to do themselves out of a job and teach people them skills and independence to have a bit of a success in their lives. I think the hardest thing about PBS sometimes is implementation and maintenance. I think often we know what to do. We know what needs to change, and I think sometimes it's really difficult to invoke that change. Sometimes we're governed by resources, sometimes we can't access professionals that we need, sometimes we know that environments are deficient and are causing some of the issues, and it's really difficult to be able to make changes for them. But it's not that they're insurmountable, but there are challenges along the way for that. And I think the biggest question that I get asked, particularly when I do the PBS coaches courses, is how do we change culture within organisations? How do we change people who are saying, I don't think it should be done like this, I think it should be done a different way, that might have a slightly different set of values where they've come. And that can be a challenge, and I think we spend a lot of time trying to unpick that challenge, which again isn't insurmountable. And I think that starts with really good policies. It starts with good training for people, educating them about different ways. I certainly use a lot of academic papers in my practice, but we translate them so they're accessible for people. So we're showing people that this sort of approach works, and we have huge amounts of evidence that it works. So by using some of those things, by modelling and coaching, we can bring people to the other side. And I've got huge amounts of evidence that we've done that. I think sometimes with PBS as well, we make really good progress, and it's maintaining that progress that can be difficult. And somebody once told me it's a little bit like spinning plates, and you have to go back into settings occasionally and give that little plate a spin, otherwise it can fall off. So I think sometimes it's about how we don't just walk away from cases when we've made good progress. How do we remain involved, or how do we leave those organisations and individuals robust enough to be able to get advice and support so they keep good practice moving forward? I've got a couple of good success stories in Jersey. I think the first, in particular, one of the first cases I had when I moved to Jersey, which is probably common for a lot of people that work for PBS services, is probably on my second week over there, we had a family bring a teenager to the doorstep of our offices and say, we just can't cope. We love him dearly, but his behaviour is just out of control, and we just can't manage as a family. It's just bringing us to our knees. So we had to make a real effort at that stage around that individual, and that involved the whole multidisciplinary team in Jersey as well. There was functional assessments going on from the PBS team. There were sensory profile assessments being completed by the occupational therapist. We had our respite service come in to give the family some support. And we ended up finding a little flat for this individual, which wasn't ideal, given some of his sensory issues, but we worked really hard to make adjustments to make it work. And he spent part of his week in this flat, part of his week living at home, and we started to see some improvements. His behaviour at school improved as well, and we did a lot of work then. Moving forward, that individual now is in his mid-20s. He's remained living in that flat. He no longer has one-to-one 24-hour support. He lives on his own. He manages his finance. He goes shopping. Occasionally, he phones me up and he needs a bit of support. But those times he's contacted me are getting few and far between, and he's able to engage in the community and do very well. So when he phones me up and says, I've got an issue, can I meet you for a coffee to talk about it? And I think where we were 13 years ago, I think that's absolutely fantastic, and that's what makes me know that PBS works. Another example in Jersey was actually one of the first cases as well. When I got there, we still had a few people remaining in a long stay hospital, and we had one chap there who was approaching retirement age, shall we say, who'd actually not left the hospital grounds for over 20 years. And there was a number of professionals involved that were saying, actually, I don't think he should move. We don't think he's been here his whole life. It's all he knows. What impact's it going to have on his health if we move him on? Which we kind of understood as well. But there was the rest of us that felt, actually, what a difference we could make to his quality of life if we had him in his own place with his own tenancy, specialist support, what he could access in the community. And part of my role was to try to prepare him to leave. And we did loads of creative ways of doing that because he'd not even left the grounds. And in the end, we did. He left. This was nearly 13 years ago. He now has his own accommodation in the heart of St Helier with his specialist support team. He goes to the shop and buys all the things he needs. He goes for walks on the beach. He accesses a community, goes and does his shopping, has a fantastic quality of life, and we don't see some of the behaviours of concern that we saw historically in the hospital setting. So it's those sort of examples that make me feel glad about the job that I do. I don't think I ever had a light bulb moment that PBS was a way forward. I think I've been really fortunate to always work in settings that have taken a PBS approach. It wasn't always called PBS, and we didn't always have names for some of the things that we were doing, but we were always working towards the PBS way. And I think all the settings I've worked in have taken evidence-based practice and tried to push that forward. Everywhere I've been, we've been taking academic papers, the latest research, and we've been trying to make them accessible so everybody understands what's going on. And we have this link between what's happening academically in terms of research, where there's really good quality research that's showing what makes a difference and the practice that we've got in my settings. And I think all the way through we've taken this approach and we've had success using that very same method. I think to give staff that light bulb moment, I think it's about very much sometimes taking a behavioural approach with staff. I think PBS isn't just something that we should be doing for the people we support. It's also something that we should be doing for staff and organisations as well. You know, somebody said to me once, we need to change staff behaviour before we can change individual behaviour. And I think it's about giving people a bit of success, and it's reinforcing those very successes that we have. I think behaviour can be enduring, it can be difficult, and that's why it's really helpful to work on other things as well, teaching people skills, getting people to help with the washing up, getting people to be able to walk the 30 yards from their day service to their residential setting. Working with permaplans as well, which we're doing a lot, the work of Martin Segelman, positive psychology. And I think when staff start seeing that they're having success with the individuals they support, they might not be having success with the behaviour. It might take a little bit of time for us to get success with the behaviour, but they're having success with other things. I think that's when they start finding that their job is a little bit more valuable and it's more rewarding and they're getting something out of it. And I think ultimately we do get success with behaviour, and it's taking people through that process and giving them good support. I think it's a really difficult job, this is. It's really difficult working with some of the people that we work with who are challenging us with their behaviours of concern. And I think it's about making sure the staff have really good support, there's really robust debriefing packages around them, they're getting good supervision, PRAs, they're getting good training, they're getting really good support on the job. We are modelling and coaching as we go. They're able to pick up a phone in the middle of a shift and say, we've got this going on, what can we do? And actually, when they are having success, if people are celebrating this, I often write to organisations and say, this member of staff did a fantastic job yesterday, and try to make sure that I acknowledge what is happening that's good. And by acknowledging what's happening that's good, you kind of promote that success taking place. I think I've been particularly lucky that I've had some really inspiring managers all the way through my career. And even in Jersey at the moment, we have some managers that really do share our values about what we want to achieve. I was particularly lucky prior to moving to Jersey that I got a placement with Dr. Sandy Toogood's. It was called the Intensive Support Team at the time in North Wales, and I spent a number of months with Sandy and his team, which was absolutely fantastic for my development. Sandy set up one of the very first challenging behaviour teams, as it was known then in the UK, and has a wealth of knowledge and experience in this sort of work, and really set me up well. Since then, Sandy has been a lecturer and my tutor on my master's course, and more recently is one of the supervisors on my PhD as I pursue the more academic sides of my work. But certainly I would credit him with really giving me the inspiration and the knowledge I need to do some of the work that I'm doing. And I would recommend everybody to read some of Sandy's papers on active support, interactive training, and the development of positive behaviour support teams, which is invaluable.